Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
You trusted someone completely, and then one day, you didn't. There wasn't always a dramatic moment. No slammed door, no screaming match that shattered the windows. Sometimes it was quieter than that. Devastatingly quieter. It was a look that lingered too long on someone else. A phone turned face down on the kitchen counter. A laugh shared in a room you weren't invited into. Or maybe it was the 100th small promise broken, so small you felt foolish even mentioning it. Until one morning you woke up and realized you'd been holding your breath for years. And the worst part, you kept telling yourself you were overreacting. That's where trust dies, isn't it? Not in the explosion. In the quiet whispers of your own gut telling you something was wrong, while you smiled at dinner, while you made the coffee, while you kept the peace, and you hushed that voice like a child tugging at your sleeve during an important conversation. Not now. Not now. Not now. Until now became too late. I want to talk to you today about something most people get completely wrong about trust. Not the self-help book version. Not the forgive and forget version that's really just a polite way of asking you to pretend. I want to talk about the anatomy of trust. What it's actually made of, where it actually breaks, and why rebuilding it, whether in someone else or in yourself, is so much more complex and so much more sacred than anyone gives it credit for. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're sitting in that weight we all carry after betrayal. Trust isn't a single thing that either exists or doesn't. It's a living structure. It has layers. It has memory. It has scar tissue. And if you've ever wondered why, after everything you've been through, you still catch yourself flinching when someone says, "I promise," this is for you. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Margaret. Margaret was 63 years old when she came to understand, really understand, that she'd spent 4 decades being the most trustworthy person in every room she entered and had almost nothing given back to her in kind. She wasn't bitter. That's what struck me. She was exhausted. There's a difference, you know. Bitterness is loud. Exhaustion is that quiet, Sunday afternoon kind of sadness that settles into your bones and makes even the sunlight feel a little distant. She'd trusted her husband with her dreams, and he'd prioritized his own. She'd trusted her adult children with her vulnerability, and they'd accidentally weaponized it in arguments. She'd trusted a close friend with a secret that later showed up at a dinner party, disguised as concern, and through all of it, Margaret had kept showing up. Kept extending the hand, kept believing that if she just gave a little more grace, a little more patience, a little more of herself, the people she loved would eventually meet her there. They didn't. And one Thursday evening, sitting alone in what she called her sanctuary, a small reading chair by the window where the garden light came in gold and soft, she asked herself a question that changed everything. When did I stop trusting myself? Not them, herself. Because that's the unspoken truth that lives underneath every story of broken trust. When someone betrays us, we don't just lose faith in them. We lose faith in our own perception. We start to question our judgment. We wonder if we're too naive, too open, too much. We begin auditing our own instincts. Those same instincts that were right all along that we shushed into silence. And we put them on trial. And slowly, without realizing it, the person we trust least in the world becomes ourselves. That is the real wound. Not what they did, what we do to ourselves afterward. So before we talk about whether to trust anyone else again, before we talk about forgiveness, about second chances, about opening back up, we have to start here, in this room, with you. Because the most important relationship you will ever have to repair is the one with your own knowing, your gut that spoke, your heart that noticed, your soul that quietly cataloged every moment something felt off, and was right every single time. That relationship is worth saving first. Stay with me. Here's something I need you to sit with for a moment. Trust doesn't break all at once. You just notice it all at once. That's a crucial difference, and most people miss it entirely. They point to a single moment, a specific Tuesday, a particular phone call, and they say, "That's when it happened. That's when everything fell apart." But the truth is, that Tuesday was just the moment the light finally hit the crack at the right angle for you to see it. The fracture had been forming long before. Quietly, patiently, in the dark, Think about the last time trust truly broke for you. Not a small disappointment. I mean the real thing. The one that changed how you sleep, how you laugh, how you let people stand close to you. Now ask yourself honestly, were there signs before that moment? Tiny, almost invisible signals that something wasn't quite right? Of course there were. There always are. And this isn't about blame. Not theirs, and especially not yours. This is about understanding the architecture. Because you cannot repair a structure you don't understand. A contractor doesn't walk into a damaged house and start swinging a hammer without knowing where the load-bearing walls are. Neither should you. Trust, at its core, is built on 3 invisible pillars. Most people only ever think about one of them. The first pillar is consistency, the one everyone knows. Did they do what they said they'd do? Did their actions line up with their words over time? This is the most visible pillar, which is why it's the one we talk about. It's measurable. It's concrete. You can point to it. But here's what's underneath consistency that nobody mentions: predictability of character. It's not just about whether someone keeps their promises. It's about whether you know in your bones who they're going to be on a hard day. When the pressure comes. When they're scared or embarrassed or backed into a corner. Do they become someone you recognize? Or do they become a stranger wearing a familiar face? That stranger in a familiar face feeling, that's what haunts people, not the betrayal itself, the shape-shifting. The second pillar is benevolence, the quiet belief that the person in front of you genuinely wants good things for you. Not just neutrally, not just passively, but actively. That when you're not in the room, they're still on your side, that your well-being lives somewhere in their daily considerations. This pillar is so subtle, so easy to fake in the short term, because people can perform benevolence beautifully when things are easy. It's effortless to champion someone when championing them costs you nothing. The real question, the one trust is always silently asking, is what happens when being on your side requires sacrifice, when it's inconvenient, when it conflicts with what they want. That's where you find out if benevolence is real or just a pleasant costume. And the third pillar, the one almost no one talks about, is integrity of self. Not their honesty with you, their honesty with themselves. Because a person who lies to themselves will eventually, inevitably, lie to you. Not always maliciously. Sometimes they genuinely don't know they're doing it. They've told themselves a story about who they are that doesn't match the reality of how they behave. And they've been telling it so long, it feels like truth to them. You've met this person. Maybe you've loved this person. Maybe you've been this person at certain chapters of your life. We all have. That's not a judgment. That's just honesty. Now here's where it gets tender. And I need you to stay with me through this part, because it's the part that's hardest to look at directly. Sometimes trust breaks not because someone else failed those 3 pillars, but because we were never truly seeing them clearly to begin with. I know that's uncomfortable. But Margaret, remember Margaret from her golden reading chair. One of the things she eventually had to reckon with was this. She had spent years trusting an idea of her husband more than she trusted the actual man standing in front of her. She had loved the version of him that existed on their wedding day so faithfully, so fiercely, that she'd quietly edited out every piece of evidence that he had quietly become someone different. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't naive in the way people sometimes use that word as a quiet insult. She was hopeful, and hope, when it's untethered from reality, becomes a kind of blindness we choose, not because we're weak, but because seeing clearly sometimes feels like it will cost us everything. The weight we carry after betrayal isn't just grief over what happened. It's grief over the version of reality we were living in. The one that felt so real, so solid beneath our feet, and the dizzying, groundless moment when the floor turned out to be painted sky. That groundlessness has a name in psychology. It's called a shattered assumption, when the foundational beliefs we use to navigate the world get cracked open all at once. The belief that good people don't do terrible things. The belief that love means safety. The belief that if you give enough, you receive enough in return. The belief that you would know if something was deeply wrong. Those beliefs aren't foolish. They're necessary. We need them to function, to connect, to love at all. But when they shatter, the recovery isn't just emotional. It's existential. You're not just healing a wound. You're rebuilding a world. And that is exhausting in a way that a good night's sleep cannot touch. Which is why so many women exactly like you, women exactly like Margaret, don't just become cautious after betrayal. They become architects of distance. They learn to love from behind glass, to be warm without being close, to be present without being reachable, to give generously of their time and their laughter and their energy, while quietly, methodically keeping the most essential parts of themselves locked in a room no one else has the key to. It feels like protection. And in some ways it is. But it's also a very elegant, very convincing, very lonely kind of prison. And that's where we're headed next, into that room. Into the question of whether the door was meant to lock from the inside or the outside, and whether after everything you still have the key. Because you do. I promise you, you do. There's a particular kind of morning that comes after deep betrayal. You've probably had it. You wake up and for just a few seconds, maybe 3, maybe 5, you don't remember. There's just light coming through the curtains and the ordinary sounds of the world outside, and your body still warm and unhurried under the covers. And then it lands, that wave of remembering. And the day hasn't even started yet, and already you're exhausted. Those mornings are their own kind of grief, and nobody warns you about them. Nobody warns you that healing isn't linear, that you can feel genuinely at peace on a Wednesday and then hear a song or catch a familiar scent or watch a stranger laugh in a way that reminds you of someone, and suddenly you're right back in it. Not at square one, but somewhere tender and unfinished that you thought you'd already walked through. That's not regression. That's not weakness. That is simply what it looks like to be a human being trying to integrate something that fundamentally doesn't want to be integrated. Betrayal doesn't file itself neatly. It shows up uninvited, often dressed as something else entirely, irritability or numbness, or a sudden inexplicable need to cry in the grocery store over nothing. You're not falling apart. You're falling through. And there's a destination on the other side. But here's the conversation I want to have with you now. The one that most healing advice skips entirely because it's harder than it sounds. Rebuilding trust is not the same thing as going back. Read that again if you need to. So much of what we're told, by well-meaning friends, by self-help culture, even sometimes by therapists, implicitly frames recovery as a return. Get back to who you were. Get back to being open. Get back to trusting. As if the goal is to restore some previous version of yourself that existed before the wound. As if healing means erasure. But you cannot go back. And honestly, you shouldn't want to. The woman you were before, she was beautiful and brave and worthy of so much more than she received. But she was also operating with incomplete information. She was trusting with a kind of wholeness that hadn't yet learned to ask certain questions. That version of you was doing her absolute best with what she knew. Honor her. Love her. But don't try to become her again, because you know things now. Quiet, hard-won, bone-deep things. And that knowledge isn't damage, it's architecture. It's the new load bearing walls of a stronger, more discerning, more honestly you version of yourself. The goal isn't to trust like you did before. The goal is to learn to trust in a way you never have. With your eyes open, your instincts honored, and your self-worth non-negotiable. So what does that actually look like? Not philosophically, practically. In the ordinary Tuesday of your real life. It starts with something I call calibrated trust. And it sounds simple, but most of us were never taught it. Especially women of your generation, who were often raised to extend grace first and ask questions later, to be accommodating, to smooth things over, to give people the benefit of the doubt so reflexively that it became invisible to you. Calibrated trust means this: you don't start at 0, and you don't start at 100. You start at watching, not suspiciously, not with your arms crossed and your walls up, cataloging every micro-expression for evidence of wrongdoing. That's not discernment. That's just anxiety wearing the costume of wisdom. True calibrated trust is patient. It's curious. It says, I am here, I am open, and I am paying attention. It lets people show you who they are across time and circumstances, not just in the easy moments. It notices whether someone's behavior on a difficult day matches the person they presented on a good one. It listens to what people say about others when those others aren't in the room. because that is always the most honest preview of how they'll eventually speak about you. And it listens, really listens, to that quiet interior voice, the one you spent years shushing, the one that was right. Margaret learned this slowly. The way you learn anything real, not in a single revelation, but in accumulation, small moments of choosing herself over the performance of being fine. The first time she did it, it felt almost physically uncomfortable. A friend had made a comment, often, supposedly joking, that touched a wound Margaret had once confided about. And instead of laughing it off the way she always had, instead of smoothing it over with graciousness she didn't feel, she said quietly, simply, "That one landed wrong for me." 5 words. The friend was startled, apologized immediately, genuinely, and something shifted in the room, not dramatically, but perceptibly, like a window being opened in a space that hadn't had fresh air in a long time. Margaret told me later it was one of the most terrifying things she'd done in years, and one of the most important, because what she was really doing, what those 5 words were really saying, was this: I trust myself enough to speak up. I value this relationship enough to be honest in it. And I value myself enough not to swallow things that don't sit right just to keep the peace. That is the beginning of rebuilding, not grand gestures, not dramatic confrontations, not a formal declaration that you're finally ready to let someone back in. It's 5 words. It's a raised eyebrow instead of a gracious smile. It's allowing yourself to need a moment before you answer. It's choosing the small, quiet acts of self-fidelity that accumulate over time into a life where your inner world and your outer life are no longer strangers to each other. Now, what about the other person? What about forgiving the one who broke it? I want to be very careful here, because this is where well-intentioned advice can do real harm. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone who hurt you. It is not reconciliation. It is not trust restored. It is not even necessarily a conversation that involves them at all. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, the kind that actually frees you, is a private act of self-liberation. It is the moment you decide that what happened to you will no longer have first claim on your present moment. That you are no longer willing to let someone who may have moved on with their life continue to live rent-free in the most precious real estate you own, your peace. That doesn't mean what they did was acceptable. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. It doesn't mean you have to say the words out loud to anyone. It simply means you're choosing to stop organizing your inner life around their failure. Some people deserve a second chance. Some relationships are worth the difficult, humbling, courageous work of repair, when both people are willing to be honest about what happened and committed to building something different. Not something restored, something new. But some people have shown you, clearly and repeatedly, exactly who they are. And the most loving thing you can do for yourself, the most trusting thing, in fact, is to believe them. There's a sanctuary waiting for you on the other side of this. Not a life without risk. Not a heart behind glass. Not the careful, managed half-presence of someone who's learned to love from a safe distance. A real sanctuary, one built from self-knowledge and hard-won discernment and the quiet, unshakable dignity of a woman who knows her own worth. Not because someone finally confirmed it, but because she stopped waiting for that confirmation. That sanctuary has room for love. Genuine, close, vulnerable love. It has room for deep friendship and new beginnings, and the kind of trust that is richer for having been tested. It just also has, finally, room for you. Tiarieste Natowai, Part 4, The Return. Coming home to yourself, I want to tell you something that took me a long time to believe. The fact that you still care, that you're still here, still thinking about this, still willing to sit with the uncomfortable and the unresolved. That is not your weakness. That is the most quietly radical thing about you. Because the easier path after everything is to go numb, to decide, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that caring is simply too expensive, to build a life that looks full from the outside, the grandchildren, the garden, the coffee with friends, while keeping the most essential, most luminous part of yourself in a kind of permanent winter, safe, undisturbed, unlived. So many people choose that path, and nobody judges them for it, because from the outside it looks like peace. But you know the difference between peace and stillness that's really just held breath. You've felt both. And the fact that you're still asking questions, still wanting more than a beautiful, managed surface, tells me something important about who you are. You haven't given up on yourself, even when it felt like you had. Even in the years when you went through the motions so convincingly that you almost fooled yourself. Some part of you, stubborn and luminous in yours, kept the candle lit. This part is about honoring that. Let's talk about what coming home to yourself actually feels like, not the Instagram version, not the montage of bubble baths and journal pages and women laughing alone with salads. The real version, the one that's slower and stranger and more ordinary than anyone advertises. It usually starts not with a breakthrough, but with a pause. A moment where you catch yourself about to do the thing you've always done. The automatic yes, the swallowed feeling, the gracious performance of being fine. And instead of doing it, you just stop for a second. And in that second, you feel the full weight of what you were about to do. And you make a different choice. Maybe just a slightly different one. Maybe just pausing before you speak instead of rushing to fill the silence with reassurance you don't actually feel. That pause is everything. That pause is the distance between a life that happens to you and a life you're actually in. Margaret's real turning point, the one she talks about when she describes the moment things genuinely began to shift, wasn't a confrontation, wasn't a therapy breakthrough, wasn't a dramatic decision to cut someone out or let someone back in. It was a Tuesday afternoon in her garden. She'd been weeding, the kind of repetitive, physical work that quiets the thinking mind and opens something else underneath. And she had a thought so simple it almost embarrassed her. She thought, I actually like being here right now, just me. Not in a lonely way, not in a resigned way, in a genuinely uncomplicated way. She'd spent so much of her life measuring her own presence against someone else's response to it. Am I too much? Not enough? Is he happy? Are they comfortable? Does she still like me? The constant, exhausting referendum on her own worthiness, conducted through other people's reactions. And for one Tuesday afternoon, kneeling in the dirt with sun on her shoulders, she just wasn't doing that. She was just there, whole, sufficient, hers. She cried a little, she told me. Not from sadness, from recognition. The way you cry when you see someone you love after a very long time. She was meeting herself. Maybe for the first time in decades. This is what rebuilding trust ultimately leads to if you let it go all the way. Not just better judgment about other people. Not just stronger boundaries or smarter choices, though those matter and they come. It leads to a fundamental return to your own company. A rediscovery that you are all on your own enough. Not enough in the diminished sense. Not, I suppose I can manage alone. Enough in the fullest, most generous sense. That your perception is worth trusting. That your needs are worth voicing. That your instincts, those quiet whispers that have been right about so much, deserve a seat at the table of your own life. That the unspoken truths you've been carrying about what you needed, what you deserved, what you felt but couldn't quite justify out loud, were never the problem. The problem was a world that was sometimes too small, or too distracted, or too self-occupied to hold them alongside you, and so you held them alone. Quietly. For years. You can put some of that weight down now. I want to speak directly to the women who are somewhere in the middle of this. Not at the beginning, raw and disoriented, but not quite at the Garden Tuesday either. The ones who've done real work, made real progress, and still find themselves surprised by grief at unexpected moments. Still find themselves hesitating at the threshold of real closeness with someone new. Here's what I want you to know. That hesitation is not failure. It is not evidence that you're broken, or that you haven't healed correctly, or that there's something fundamentally wrong with your capacity to connect. It is simply your nervous system doing its job. It learned something. It's trying to protect you. And it needs not to be overridden, not to be shamed, but to be reassured, gently, patiently, repeatedly. You reassure it the way you'd reassure anyone who'd been through something hard, with consistency, with gentleness, with evidence, gathered slowly over time, that the present moment is not the same as the past one. That not every open door leads to the same room you got hurt in. Some doors lead somewhere new. And you get to decide, with your eyes open, your instincts awake, your self-worth intact, which ones you're willing to walk through. There's a particular kind of trust that becomes available to you on the other side of all this. And I want to name it because I don't think it gets talked about enough. It's not naive trust, the wide, open, unquestioning kind that belongs to people who haven't been tested yet. There's beauty in that kind, but it's not yours anymore, and that's okay. It's not cynical distrust either. That wary, preemptive closing of doors before anyone's even knocked. That's not wisdom. That's just old pain running the show. What becomes available to you is something rarer. Something I'd call seasoned trust. The kind that has texture to it. That knows what betrayal costs and chooses openness anyway. Not blindly, but deliberately. That can hold complexity. This person is flawed and worth knowing. This relationship is imperfect and genuinely nourishing. I've been hurt before, and I am not defined by that hurt. Seasoned trust doesn't need everything to be certain before it steps forward. It just needs to feel, in its honest and calibrated gut, that the ground is real enough to hold weight. And it knows, with a quiet confidence that no amount of earlier pain could ultimately extinguish, that even if it gets it wrong sometimes, it will survive. It has before. It's stronger now. And it belongs fully and without apology to itself. So here is where I want to leave you. Not with a list of steps. Not with affirmations to tape to your bathroom mirror. But with a single image. Picture Margaret in her reading chair. The one by the window where the garden light comes in gold and soft. She's older now than when we first met her. A little slower, maybe. But there's something in her face that wasn't there before. A kind of settled quality. Not resignation. Arrival. She's been through the shattering and the groundlessness and the long, unglamorous work of finding her own floor again. She's made peace with people she needed to make peace with. She's released people she needed to release. She's said 5-word truths in rooms where she would have once stayed silent. She's wept in gardens and met herself in the dirt and discovered, to her own quiet amazement, that the company was good. She still gets it wrong sometimes. Still misreads a moment. Still occasionally gives more than she should to someone who can't hold it. She's human. She always will be. But she doesn't abandon herself afterward anymore. She comes back. Quickly, and with something that feels almost like tenderness, toward her own imperfect, persevering, remarkably resilient self. That chair by the window is her sanctuary. But she knows now. And this is the thing that changed everything. She knows now that the sanctuary was never really the chair. It was always her. It has always been you. Welcome home.